And we're live. Good evening. Welcome to this week's episode of the Teachers Side Income Business. This is Roger Davis, your host. So call your colleagues, get them to log on. We do this every Thursday at 6 p.m. And I was coming over here. I was running a bit late today, and it was a bit rushing. I got to thinking, you know what? Because we normally do two of these broadcasts. We do one at 6, and then there's one that people are supposed to register for. We dive deeper into the topic, and then at 7 o'clock we go live with that one. But that one you have to register for. You either have to be in our Facebook group, or um, you have to register for it. So I checked it just after before I came live, and there wasn't anybody that registered as yet. And I got to thinking, I just started to promote this thing yesterday. Maybe people need a little bit more time to register. So I'm going to be promoting, instead of doing the live, the deeper dive at 7 o'clock, I'm going to run it maybe on Monday to give people more time to register. So we're going to just brush on the topic. We'll go fairly deep, but not as deep as I want to go during the other broadcast that we're doing on Monday. So uh, you guys can always leave a comment or something to let me know what you think. But I don't want to run that one unless I actually have people registered. So that's the plan for today. We're only going to run this 6 o'clock broadcast, and this one's entitled the test run: how you validate your expertise before you go and build anything, right? Because um, it's what I've been told is the number one marketing mistake that people make, and regardless of whether you're selling courses or whether you're preparing for a big corporate launch, is assuming that you know what your market wants. And so even though you might think you have a good idea, it's always good to validate it, right? And so um, it's one of the topics that is the most asked, not only about how you validate it, but people normally ask, well, what do I have to? I'm not too sure. First, it comes to me like, what do I teach? I mean, I teach this subject, or I teach these kinds of things to kids. What do I have to offer really? And I've spoken to this extensively in previous broadcasts about your pedagogical content knowledge and your expertise. Okay, and so it's not about the information that you teach, it's about the amount of time that you've had moving students from one state to the next. It's something that teachers tend to take for granted, and that should not be taken for granted, because out here in the marketplace, that is exactly what people are paying you for. Okay? You ever wonder, and we touched on this last week, if you ever wondered why is it that people are still buying more courses than ever, even though there is such a thing as AI? Well, now you know, right? People are not really paying for the information, they're paying for um, somebody helping them to get them over the finishing line, because the information is not where the value really is. Okay, in this day and age, we should all know that. So that's the question we first get, right? What am I really going to offer? And then we covered several weeks ago the thing, like the core actual course that you're going to be offering. Of course, there's three things you have to look at, and what you offer is going to be where these three things overlap, right? So we're talking specifically about what you have the most interest and capacity to teach, what people out there are clamoring for, right? The sort of thing that you might ask yourself is, well, what are some of the things that people usually come to me for help for? And a lot of times it has nothing to do with your subject that you teach in the school, all right? And then the third part of that, those two things have to overlap with. And again, I'm only brushing on the topic today because we went into it in a lot of detail about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Is that, there are some topics that brush on your expertise and they are in demand by adults in the marketplace, but that they simply won't pay for. They want it and you can teach it, but people are not used to the idea of paying for certain things. And so it's not that you can't make money doing those, it's just that it's not low hanging fruit and you would have to kind of educate the population before before you actually can make money. And that's a very expensive proposition from a marketing point of view. So that's the way how this topic today is usually introduced to me. Those three things come into play first, right? And then after that, now when they've settled on a topic, I am the one that usually bring up, okay, so now that you have a fairly good idea where those three things overlap, now you have a good idea of what you want to teach. But that doesn't mean you should start building a course. It's the number one mistake that you can make. So what you do instead is you validate the idea. And that's what we're going to delve into today, right? How do you validate your expertise before you actually build out the course? And this is very valuable information because you would not believe how many people have spent months building a course only to find out that after they start marketing it, it never sold. Either people didn't want it or they weren't willing to pay for it. So validating your course is a very, very good idea. Okay, I have my notes here prepared. You're going to see me glance a little bit downwards for the notes because I like to come prepared. And same like all the other times. You can jump in at any time with questions because that's the format we actually would like to for this live broadcast to morph into. I only make a presentation because I know we're early in this, and so I have to have content to see this with, but hopefully at some point people will start coming on the live and asking questions instead of waiting for the replay, right? I look at the numbers for these broadcasts and people do look at them. There are even people that complete the entire broadcast, but they never comment. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that people who are looking at broadcasts and not commenting, it's mainly because they're teachers and they don't want it to be known out there that they're interested in this, right? So I have a lot of lurkers, and I'm still not quite sure how to deal with that. My idea was, of course, if I could bring this into the private Facebook group, it would solve the problem. So we'll continue doing it and see what happens. All right. So every Thursday at 6, we want to be doing this. All right. So once more, I want to welcome everybody on the broadcast. If you're looking at this from LinkedIn, all right, you can actually make comments, but when I reply, you won't be able to see it. If you're doing this, if you're seeing this on Facebook or on the YouTube, fine, you're going to be able to both make comments or ask questions, and you're going to be able to see my answer. And I'm really looking forward to some kind of question or feedback. All right, so let's begin. I want to start tonight with the most common reason the veteran educators who are, they're thinking of starting to build out a course. But never actually build it. And a lot of time it's not the time and it's not the technology, it's not even confidence, although that comes up a lot. It's this question which sits, quietly at the back of the mind, and it never quite goes away. What if I build the whole thing and nobody buys it, right? The fear is legitimate, it's not irrational. Building an online course or program takes real time, real energy and real emotional investment. And the idea of putting all of that in and discovering that the market doesn't really respond, well, that's a real risk, it deserves a real answer of how you can approach this as a problem. So tonight, I want to give you that answer, and because there's a way to find out if people will pay for what you know before you build anything, and most educators, most people in the online educator space never do it. Tonight's topic, um, and I'm going to go into this, as I mentioned before, more on the surface, and we're going to go more into it on Monday if I have enough people register for that broadcast. Okay, so, pick your topic. At some point, just as you do for a normal course that you teach in any traditional school, you would outline your modules, and then because if you're doing it online, you're going to have to record your content, and then you're going to have to build a sales page, then you're going to have to launch the course, and somewhere between outline your models and the launching of the course, often after months of work, the person finds out whether or not anyone wanted what they built. And so I want to tell you why that sequence is backwards, and why it's particularly backwards for a veteran educator um, who's been trained to plan carefully, right? Um, and most of you, again, veteran teachers with all the experience that I'm talking about, you do a lot more than just plan carefully. You tend to execute more thoroughly than most of the people I know on the online marketing space, right? Because you test and you go back, and sometimes you reteach, and sometimes you go back and you retest, and that sort of thing is very rare online. Okay, so you have that expertise is extremely, or that experience is extremely valuable. Um, so having gone through that experience, it's something that you should bear in mind even when you enter the online course space. When you build first and you validate it second, you're taking on all the risk before you have any information. So you spend months creating something based entirely on your best guess about what the market wants, and your best guess, no matter how experienced and intelligent you are, is still a guess. Okay, so this is quite unlike in the traditional education where you have a curriculum that is sometimes mandated by law, and you have years of experience teaching it, and there's a standard that this is what has to be taught by a certain time. That ball game is not no longer the ball game that, of course, that you're playing here, and it's something that you hope to sell, and so demand becomes an issue that you never had to deal with, right? In the classroom, if what you're offering is not in demand and the student doesn't want it has nothing to do with anything, that's still what you have to teach, right? And so you have to deal more with motivation. Out in this space, you're not going to have to work hard on motivating anybody, right? Because people are either going to be interested or they're not. And once you've done your marketing and you've done it well, and people sign up, motivation is no longer your problem. Okay. Um, but once you're in a space where you put the course together and then you launch it, and then just without validating anything first, it's a big risk. It's still a guess, and it's not a risk that you should venture into, because, of course, you have very limited time, and You don't want to be spending all the time launching a course and then it doesn't sell. The professional approach, the one that respects your time, your energy, and your expertise, is to get market feedback before you build. All right, to find out with real adult learners whether the transformation that you're offering is something that they'll actually invest in. So before the course exists, you have to do this. Before the modules you're recording, before the sales page is even written, all right? That process is called validation, and it's the difference between building something and that sells and hoping that people will buy it, and knowing people want it before you even build it. No, I want to be specific. Validation actually means um, well, let's say what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that you have to assume that it requires a big audience or a sophisticated marketing funnel before you can sell it, right? That's not what validation is, right? The validation process is merely a little test to see if the idea has legs, okay? In other words, you're just decreasing the risk that you're offering something that's not going to sell. So validation at its most basic is you make an offer to a small group of real people and you find out whether they are going to pay for it, not whether they think it sounds interesting, not whether they say, "Oh, I love that." Um, you're testing whether they're actually going to hand over money for it. All right. So that's what you want to put to the test. Because here's the truth about human behavior that every experienced educator already knows from years of watching students making choices under pressure. People's stated intentions and their actual behavior are two very different things, right? A student who says, I'm going to study tonight is not the same as a student who actually studies tonight. And an adult who says, I would definitely buy something like that is not the same as an adult who actually pulls out the credit card. So the only valid signal is the transaction itself. Everything before the transaction is a hypothesis. Validation is how you test the hypothesis quickly, cheaply, and with a small enough group that the stakes are manageable before you make the much larger investment of building the full thing. So let me tell you what the test run actually looks like in practice for a veteran educator like yourself. First, you identify the specific adult audience whose problem you're equipped to solve. We covered that, I think, 3 weeks ago. We've been doing that work, for some time now. The expertise inventory, the niche framework, the audience lens, we've covered all of that. So you know who that person is, and you're getting there. You create a minimal version of your offer. That's where the validation starts. Not the full course, not the polished program, a short, focused live experience, a workshop, a small cohort, uh, a 3 session um, uh, piece of the course that gives it the entire course, but in a smaller version, right? That can still achieve some modicum of the transformation in a condensed form. All right. And I hope I'm being quite clear here that you make that offer to a small group, a small test group. Somewhere between, I don't know, 5 and 20 people is plenty for a first test run. Not, not 500. Right? So we're not talking about a big launch. A small intentional group of real people who have the problem that you're trying to solve. So the piece that you might be scared of contemplating is that you're actually going to charge for this condensed course. This is a critical part. You're not offering it for free. So you're not going to be asking people to attend a preview. You ask them to pay, even if the price is modest for a first run, because the payment is a validation signal. And I'm going to repeat that again, right? The actual payment is the validation signal. All right. And I know people are going to be asking, okay, but what do you charge for something like that? And we can go into more depth in that if you register for the more in-depth version, and I want to do on Monday, right? So if you're looking at this on the replay, just give me a comment somewhere there, and I'm going to make sure that I give you a way for you to sign up to that, right? Because pricing is one of the things that I want to cover. But no, the long and short of it is that if you're going to validate, offering free attendance is not validation. It tells you nothing, right? Because you can get tire kickers. Tire kickers, that's what we call them. People who are just looking for a freebie, right? Paid attendance tells you everything. Somebody who is willing to pay a price, no matter how small, validates that you're onto a good idea. Because contrary to a lot of people's opinion, I don't care how good a marketer you are, it's very, very difficult to get people to put their hands in their pocket, pull out a credit card, and give you money for something that you're offering. They only do that when they're convinced that what you're offering them in return is worth more than the money that they're paying you. And people don't do that easily, and I don't care how good you can talk, right? If you're the best talker, the best marketer, the best grifter in the world, and you can get people to do that once, you're still not going to be a very good business person because people are not going to stick around and buy anything else from you. Right? So I don't think that's the kind of entrepreneur you want to become if you're looking to offer a course out there. Right? So you charge for this course, whatever the price is. We're going to talk more about that in the next broadcast. Not next Thursday. I need you to register. Right? So give me an indication, and I'm going to make sure you have a link so you can register. And we're probably going to do it on Monday. Right? So you charge for it, and then you deliver it. You show up, you teach, of course, you get feedback, and you find out what lands and what needs to be refined. And of course, you end that first test run with something that's something that no amount of planning can give you. It gives you proof. It also gives you confidence. All right. And those of you who've been following me for a little bit of time, you realize that I'm just a little bit ahead of the curve, you guys, because I'm actually been going through this same process since November of last year. Right, so I'm only a few months ahead of you. But once people register and they attend the course and they give you feedback, you have something. You're sure you're onto something, right? Because it's real people and they've paid you real money and they've asked you real questions. And if you can answer those questions effectively, you will get them real results. So that's a test run, and it's the fastest, most efficient, most honest way to find out what you're actually building before you build it, right? And you might find out that you have the information that you're getting from your test run causes you to make substantial changes to what you had intended to offer in the first place. Okay, so this is very, very, very valuable marketing information that you get from doing your test run. All right. So if you have a good topic, doesn't mean that what you've decided is the way to get there, the transformation towards that topic. Um, a lot of times, the type of questions that you get from offering your course in its condensed test run form will get you to give you a more perfect offer when you finally get it online. All right. Good. I'm still not seeing any comments, so we're going to continue, right? What if nobody signs up for the test run? I know that this is a question because it was my question in January. 'Cause, um, the first time I ran it, nobody signed up. And I had to make some tweaks. Right? The sad news is that you've learned that you've learned something really, really valuable. And the good news is that you've learned something very valuable at minimal cost. All right? Before you spend months building the full thing, the test run that doesn't feel is not a failure, it's information. It tells you either that your offer isn't specific enough, or that you're talking to the wrong audience, or that the way you're describing it isn't connecting. All right? So all of these are solvable. But at least you didn't go spend months building something. You could fix the problem before you put in all that effort. Not all of these are reasons to abandon your expertise. They're reasons to refine your approach and try again what you've learned. We're going to cover the thing about charge, and then, as I said, if you give me some kind of indication that you want me to go deeper on Monday, let me know, and I'm going to make that one of the topics that I go deeper on. As a matter of fact, here's what I think I want to do. Any question whatsoever that I get, since people are not willing to ask questions on the live, right? What I'm going to do instead is any question I get, whether you inbox me on any of these platforms, all right? Because this is going out in all three platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So whatever question I get, I'm going to be sending you a link to register for Monday's deeper dive. So that's where I'm going to leave it for this week. It's just shy of 28 minutes. And so I want to respect your time and make sure that it doesn't go too far past the 25-minute mark. Right, so drop your comments or your questions, and if you don't want to do that publicly in the comments, in an inbox me, and I'm going to make sure you have a link so you can register, and we're going to go live and have a deeper dive on Monday. It's probably Monday at 6, but of course, if we have an interaction at that time is not optimal for you, then I'm quite flexible to adjust it. That's all for this week. So. And we see you again. If I don't see you on Monday, I'll see you again next week, Thursday, because we have some big things starting next week. And so look forward to that. We're going to be offering some more intensive sessions beginning next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.